The twin sons of Kralthun were setting behind the blood-red hills, painting the land in fire and shadow. The air was thick with the scent of dust and prey. It was the time of the hunt, when the grown predators roared and the cubs watched, dreaming of the day they too would run with the pack. Among those cubs was Ron, small for his age, his fur streaked with pale gold and ash. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but his eyes, sharp, curious, and always questioning, saw more than most adults ever noticed. The elders often said, "Cubs are meant to follow, not think." But Ron didn't like following. He liked understanding. That evening, while the adults gathered around the hunting fires, Ryan and 4 other cubs slipped away into the valley below. The land there was forbidden, a scar of metal and glass from a forgotten war. It was a human crash site. No predator cub had ever gone near it, not after the elders declared it cursed. But curiosity burned brighter than fear in their young hearts. They crept closer through the cold air, their claws crunching against strange white bones that weren't bones at all, metal ribs of a ship long dead. Ron sniffed the air. "It smells old," he whispered. Another cub, Kara, laughed nervously. "Maybe the ghosts of humans still hunt here." "Humans don't hunt," Ron said. "They think." Inside the broken ship, they found the remains of things they couldn't name. Seats, screens, helmets, and one glowing cube that still hummed with life. Ron touched it. The cube pulsed and opened like an eye. A soft blue light filled the dark. A voice, calm, human, and ghostly, spoke. "Welcome to Tactical Simulation Human War Games." The cubs jumped back, hissing in fear. But Ron stepped forward. The blue light turned into images, soldiers in strange armor, hiding, flanking, signaling. They weren't beasts. They moved with purpose, not rage. They didn't fight alone. They fought together. Hours passed as the cubs watched humans move like shadows and lightning. Ambush, retreat, trap, strike. No roars, no claws, just minds and teamwork. Kara's tail flicked. "Why do they not fight face to face?" she asked. Ron answered softly, "Because they don't need to." He watched as the soldiers won again and again, smaller, weaker, outnumbered, yet always victorious. The word strategy flashed across the hollow screen again and again. When the cube finally dimmed, Ron sat in silence. He could still hear the calm human voice in his head. "Victory is not strength. It is intelligence." The cubs returned home long after dark. The elders scolded them, thinking they had been chasing bugs or hiding from training. But Ron didn't hear the scolding. His mind was racing. That night, under the glow of Kralthun's moons, he gathered the cubs again. He drew lines in the sand with a claw, showing formations, traps, and ambushes, just like in the human videos. "Let's play their game," he said. The cubs followed him, giggling at first, but the game soon turned serious. They learned to move silently, to watch each other's signals, to wait for the right moment. Ron taught them words he had heard from the glowing cube: cover, flank, retreat, bait. They didn't know what they meant at first. But with every mistake, every laugh, and every small victory, they began to understand. And when the dawn came, Ron looked toward the camp of the adults on the ridge above. He saw them sharpening claws, roaring for dominance, repeating the same rituals for the 1,000th time. A small smile crossed his face. "They think they're the hunters," he whispered, "but they don't even know what hunting is." The other cubs stared at him, eyes wide. Ron's gaze burned like a spark in the darkness. "Tomorrow," he said, "we hunt them, their way." The others gasped, half in fear, half in thrill. It was madness to challenge the adults, but Ron didn't care. He had seen something the elders never had, a new kind of power. Not the power of claws, not the power of roars, but the power of thought. And that night, for the first time in predator history, the cubs began to plan. The next night, the moons of Kralthun hung low and pale, bathing the jungle in silver light. Every shadow seemed alive. Every whisper of wind sounded like a secret. Far from the campfires of the adults, the cubs gathered once again, silent, alert, and trembling with excitement. Ron stood in the center, his tail flicking slowly. The glow of the holocube shone faintly beside him. He had watched it again and again, memorizing every move the humans made. "Tonight," he said quietly, We stop playing. We start training. The others exchanged nervous glances. Kara's ears twitched. If the elders find out. They won't, Ron interrupted. We hunt in silence. We learn in silence, the cubs nodded, and the training began. At first it was chaos. They tripped over roots. They growled too loud. They attacked too soon. Their instincts screamed to leap, to bite, to fight face to face, but Ron forced them to stop. No noise. No claws, he said. Humans wait. Humans plan. He made them move through the forest one step at a time, signaling with hand gestures he copied from the holovids. They crawled, rolled, and hid behind rocks. They learned to breathe quietly, to listen to the rhythm of the jungle, and to each other. Hours passed. Mist rolled over the forest floor like a living ghost. Ron whispered, "You see that fallen tree? Imagine it's an enemy camp. Kara, lead the distraction. Jorhain, circle behind." The cubs spread out, hearts pounding. Kara threw a stone to make noise. The others slipped behind unseen. When Ron gave the signal, they struck together, quick and silent, a clean hit. No sound, no roar, only precision. The cubs froze, then started laughing, and not from humor, but from shock. "It worked," Kara whispered. "It actually worked," Ron smiled. "Because we worked together." Night after night they returned. They trained in rain and fog, under the burning suns and through long cold winds. Their bodies grew faster. Their eyes sharper. Their teamwork flawless. They began building traps, simple at first, then smarter. Holes covered with leaves, rocks balanced on vines, decoys made of bones and fur. Each idea came from the same voice that haunted Ron's dreams. Victory is intelligence. He didn't know if it was the cube's voice or something else now whispering in his mind. Something older, deeper. One evening, while they trained in silence, a low growl echoed through the valley. The cubs froze. A pair of glowing eyes appeared from the shadows. An elder hunter, bigger than all of them combined. It was Varkal, the Alpha Second. His fangs gleamed in the dim light. "So," Varkal rumbled, "this is what cubs do when they sneak out at night. Play games of prey in shadow?" The cubs lowered their heads in fear, but Ryan didn't. He stood straight, his voice calm. "We're learning." "Learning?" Varkal sneered. "From humans." He spat the word like poison. "They are weak. They lost every war they fought. They died like animals." Ron met his gaze. "No, they won the only war that matters, the one of the mind." Varkal's snarl filled the night. "Watch your tongue, cub, or I'll tear it out." But instead of attacking, Rand said softly, "Then fight me tomorrow. One game, your way or mine." The older predator froze. For a moment, only the wind moved between them. "Foolish child," Varkal growled. "You won't last a heartbeat." He turned and vanished into the jungle. The cubs stared at Ron, horrified. "Ron, what have you done?" Kara hissed. Ron looked at his friends, his soldiers, and whispered, "I just gave us our first real battle." That night, they didn't sleep. They practiced until their muscles burned and their paws bled. Every mistake was corrected, every weakness removed. When the suns began to rise, Ron stood on the ridge, staring down at the mist-covered valley. Behind him, the cubs were silent, no longer giggling, no longer afraid. Tomorrow, they would face warriors twice their size, faster, stronger, and born to kill. But Ron smiled, because he had seen what the others hadn't. A truth buried in that human cube. Strength can win a fight. But strategy wins a war, and the cubs were ready for war. The dawn came blood-red. The suns rose slow, heavy, and merciless over the mountains of Kralthun. In the center of the predator camp, smoke from the great fire curled into the cold air. Today was the festival of the hunt, a sacred day when the strongest hunters tested their might, proving who deserved to lead and who deserved to follow. Every claw was sharpened, every fang was bared. The air itself smelled like war. But that morning the crowd was restless, because something unusual was happening. The cubs were walking toward the arena. Ron led them. His head was high, his golden fur glowing in the sunrise. Behind him, Kara and the others followed, silent but determined. Their paws left perfect, even marks in the dirt, like soldiers, not children. The adults laughed when they saw them. "What are the cubs doing here?" One elder snorted. "Maybe they want to fetch bones for us." Another chuckled. Varkal, the alpha's second, grinned with sharp teeth. No, he said. They came to beg forgiveness for their little night games. But Ron didn't bow. He stepped into the center of the arena and shouted, his voice strong and steady. We are not here to beg. We are here to challenge. The laughter stopped. Even the wind seemed to freeze. Alpha Theros, an enormous black-furred predator with scars older than Ron's lifetime, turned his burning eyes on the cub. Challenge? He growled. You dare to speak that word before your elders? Yes, Rand said simply. We challenge the adults, your hunters, to a hunt of mind and skill. A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. No cub had ever challenged an adult. It was forbidden. It was madness. Varkal stepped forward, his tail lashing. You little fool. You think your childish games make you warriors? Ron looked up at him. Not warriors, he said softly. Hunters. The insult was clear. The adults hunted with strength and fury. The cubs now hunted with precision and patience on the human way. Varkal roared, shaking the ground. Fine, I accept. When you lose, I'll make sure you crawl home without your tails. But Alpha Theros lifted one clawed hand. Silence fell. He stared at Ron for a long, tense moment. You speak boldly for one so small, the Alpha said. Tell me, cub, why should I allow this foolishness? Ron held his gaze. Because you taught us that the hunt shows who deserves to lead. If we lose, we accept our place. But if we win, you will see that strength is not the only way. The Alpha's eyes narrowed. Then slowly, he smiled. A rare, dangerous smile. So be it, he said. Tomorrow at dawn, you will hunt against Varkal and his pack. Same ground, same prey, no mercy. The crowd exploded into shouts and roars. Some cheered the madness. Others jeered. But the cub stood firm. Kara's heart pounded. Ron, she whispered. We can't win. They're giants. Ron's voice was calm. Giants fall when they stop thinking. That night, while the adults feasted and mocked them, the cubs gathered in the valley. The hollow cube's blue light flickered one last time as Rayon replayed the human tactics. Diversions, traps, teamwork. He pointed toward the hunting fields beyond the ridge. They'll expect us to attack head-on, he said. We won't. We'll vanish. Let them come to us. He assigned roles. Kara the bait, Jor the trap setter, Lyra the lookout, himself the commander. Every step, every breath planned. And when they were done, Ron whispered the words that had become their creed. We hunt like humans. We win like predators. By midnight, the forest was silent. The cubs slept beneath the ancient trees, dreaming of battle. Far above, the adults laughed around their fires, confident in their strength. But in the shadows, something new had been born. Not fear, not rebellion, but strategy. And when the suns rose again, the hunters of Kralthun would face something no predator had ever faced before. Not claws, not fangs, not rage, but intelligence. The suns rose pale and cold over the hunting grounds of Kralthun. Mist rolled across the valley like ghostly waves, hiding the tall, thorned trees and broken rocks. It was the perfect place for a hunt, and for a trap. On one side stood the adult pack, massive scarred hunters with claws that could crush bone. Their leader, Varkal, towered above the rest, his muscles rippling as he growled orders. On the other side, 5 small cubs. No armor, no claws extended. Just calm, watchful eyes. The adults laughed. They won't last 5 breaths, one muttered. Varkal smirked. I'll end this before breakfast. But Rayon didn't flinch. His golden eyes were cold and steady. Begin, he said. The Alpha's roar shook the valley. The hunt began. The adults charged like thunder, loud, fast, unstoppable. The ground shook under their paws. But when they reached the first clearing, the cubs were gone. Only silence. Varkal snarled. They're hiding, cowards. He motioned his team forward. They fanned out through the forest. The mist was thick, too thick. The air smelled strange, like wet leaves and something burning. A small spark flashed near his paw, then another. Suddenly, boom! A pile of dry roots exploded in a burst of smoke. The adults stumbled, coughing, blinded. From the shadows, soft clicks echoed. Signal stones. The cubs were communicating, unseen. Varkal roared, "Show yourselves!" But the forest answered only with whispers. Then came the first strike. A stone flew out of nowhere, hitting one hunter square between the eyes. He fell, stunned. Another stumbled into a hidden pit covered with leaves. They weren't fighting beasts. They were fighting ghosts. High above, on a tree branch, Ron watched everything. His movements were silent, his eyes sharp. Every trap was working exactly as planned. "Now," he whispered. Kara darted through the fog, throwing more smoke seeds, a trick copied from the human videos. Jor crept behind the adult flank and pulled a vine trap tight. 2 more adults crashed to the ground. Confusion spread through the older predators like disease. "Where are they?" one shouted. "Everywhere," Ryan murmured. The cubs moved like shadows, invisible but deadly. Every step was coordinated. Every signal silent. They didn't attack with rage. They attacked with logic. Varkal, furious and blinded by pride, charged forward into the thickest fog. He swung wildly, claws slashing at nothing. Then he heard a whisper, right behind him. "Humans call this a flank." Rayan lunged from the mist, slamming into Varkal's side, not with strength but with surprise. The mighty predator stumbled and crashed into a trap pit, landing hard. The cubs surrounded him, but didn't strike. Ron looked down, breathing hard but calm. "We win," he said. Varkal growled, baring his fangs. "You cheated." Ron shook his head. "We learned." When the fog cleared, the adults stood stunned, their great warriors, outsmarted by children. Alpha Theros stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He surveyed the broken traps, the hidden smoke pits, the vines, all built with skill no cub should possess. Ron stood tall before him, dirt and smoke clinging to his fur. "We used your rules," Ron said. "You said no mercy. We didn't show any." For a long time, no one spoke. Then slowly, the Alpha began to laugh, a deep, rumbling sound that shook the ground. "Human tactics," he said softly. "You learned them well." Varkal, still lying in the pit, snarled. "They're tricks, not strength." But the Alpha silenced him with a glance. "Tricks that defeated you, warrior. Remember that." That night, the cubs sat around their own small fire. No one mocked them now. The adults stayed distant, whispering in low voices. Kara looked at Ron. "We actually did it." Ron nodded slowly, staring into the flames. This was only one battle. "What's next?" she asked. Ron's eyes reflected the firelight, fierce and thoughtful. "We teach the others. We change the way we hunt. No more fighting like beasts." He looked up at the twin moons. "From now on," he whispered, "we hunt like humans and lead like predators." The valley was silent after the hunt. The smoke from the trap still hung low, curling through the air like ghosts. The adults had returned to the camp in silence, bruised, ashamed, and quiet. No songs, no victory roars, only disbelief. Cubs had beaten them. No one wanted to believe it. But no one could deny it either. Ron and his small group stood in the center of the camp as hundreds of eyes turned toward them. They were dirty, scraped, exhausted, yet they stood tall, unbroken. Varkal limped forward, his pride torn worse than his flesh. His voice was rough with fury. "You ambushed us like cowards," he growled. "You hid, you tricked, you..." Rand cut him off gently. "We used our minds." "Isn't that what hunters should do?" Varkal bared his teeth. "Hunters kill. That's what they do." Ron stepped closer. His voice stayed calm, quiet, but every word struck like thunder. "We could have killed you. All of you. But we didn't." The crowd stirred. Murmurs spread. The Alpha, Theros, stood from his stone throne and raised his hand for silence. "Speak, cub," he said. Tell us why you didn't finish the fight. Ron's eyes met his. Because humans taught us something stronger than killing. The words hung in the air, strange and heavy. Kara stepped forward beside him. They showed us that mercy isn't weakness. It's control. Theros tilted his head, curious. Control? Yes, Ron said. When we kill, it ends. When we spare, it changes everything. The Alpha's eyes narrowed. You speak like a teacher, not a cub. Ron's tail flicked once. Maybe that's because I learned from the greatest teachers this world forgot. He looked toward the horizon, toward the silent metal ruins where the human ship still slept. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then slowly, the Alpha descended from his throne. His footsteps were heavy, echoing across the ground. He stopped in front of Ron. You showed mercy to those who mocked you, Theros said softly, to those who would have killed you without hesitation. Ron nodded once. The Alpha studied him for a long, tense moment, then bowed his massive head slightly. Then you have already surpassed us. Gasps filled the camp. No Alpha had ever bowed to a cub. Varkal roared in disbelief. You honor them? These children who shamed us? Theros turned toward him, his voice sharp as claws. They didn't shame us. They reminded us. The humans may be gone, but their spirit still burns. Here. He pressed a claw to his chest. That night, the tribe gathered under the stars. The fire burned bright, casting long shadows on the sand. The cubs sat near the center, surrounded by warriors who once mocked them. For the first time, they were being listened to. Ron told them what he had learned, how humans didn't fight for fun but for survival, how they trained their minds before their muscles, how they used patience and reason, not rage and noise. He ended with a single line from the holocube, one that had stayed in his mind ever since. Victory without wisdom is defeat wearing a crown. The adults listened in silence. Even Varkal stayed quiet, though his pride still bled. Deep inside, even he felt something shift, a flicker of respect he would never admit aloud. When the night grew deep, Theros approached Ron again. You showed them mercy, the Alpha said. What will you do now? Ron looked at the stars. Teach, he said. We'll show the others what we learned. Not to end fights, but to make sure the next generation doesn't start them. The Alpha smiled faintly. The way of the mind, strange but powerful. Maybe humans left us more than bones and machines. Ron's golden eyes gleamed in the firelight. They left us a path, he said. And we just took the first step. That night, the wind carried a new kind of sound across Kralthun. Not roars of dominance, but quiet voices learning together, cubs and adults alike. The predators had learned something their ancestors never understood. That mercy is not weakness. It is evolution. The suns rose golden over the cliffs of Kralthun, lighting the valley with warm fire. But this morning something was different. There were no roaring duels, no morning battles for dominance. Instead, the predators, young and old, gathered around an open field where Ron and his cubs stood waiting. For the first time in their history, the pack wasn't preparing to fight each other. They were preparing to learn. Ron's voice carried through the still air. We are not beasts that only bite, he said. We are thinkers, hunters with purpose. He drew lines in the dirt, marking shapes, triangles, arrows, and circles. These, he explained, are not just symbols. They are plans, human war signs. They help hunters move as one. At first, the adults watched with suspicion. Many crossed their arms. Others muttered under their breath. But when the cubs demonstrated, moving silently through the grass, splitting into groups, signaling with their hands, even the doubters fell silent. The formation looked like art. Every step, every glance had meaning, one of the elders whispered. They move like wind and shadow. Another murmured, not beasts, soldiers. Ron turned to the crowd. Humans learned that unity wins battles. Alone, even the strongest falls. Together, even the smallest can rise. He pointed to Kara, who had once been the shyest of them all. Kara leads this team. Watch. She gave a simple signal and her group vanished into the fog. Moments later, a loud thump echoed. A trap had sprung. They had captured their target, a practice dummy made of vines and bones. The adults gasped. Not one sound had betrayed the cubs' approach. Ron smiled faintly. Strength breaks walls, he said. But the mind builds doors. Days turned into weeks. The cubs became instructors. The adults began to follow. At night, the campfire glowed with a new kind of warmth. Not the wild energy of competition, but the steady light of discovery. Old hunters taught the cubs how to track and stalk. The cubs, in return, taught them human tactics, stealth, coordination, patience. Together they formed something neither human nor predator. Something new, they called it the way of the silent hunt. No roars, no challenges, just movement, planning, and understanding. The once divided pack moved like one body now, each hunter watching the other's back. Even Varkal, the proud warrior who once mocked them, began to train beside the cubs. He spoke less now, his arrogance softened into quiet respect. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Ron stood beside Alpha Tharos, watching the hunters practice below. "You've changed them," Tharos said, his deep voice low. Ron shook his head. "They changed themselves. We only showed them the path," the Alpha smiled. "You think like a leader, Ron, but more than that. You think like a human." Ron turned his gaze to the sky. "Humans thought like us once, too. They learned to rise above instinct. We're just catching up." The Alpha nodded slowly. "Then perhaps the humans didn't die. Perhaps they live on, through those who remember." That night, the cubs gathered by the wreckage of the old human ship once more. The blue holocube still flickered weakly, its power nearly gone. When Ron touched it, the same soft voice played again, faint but clear. "Remember, a true warrior wins without hatred. A true leader wins without pride." The cubs bowed their heads in silence. Even the stars above seemed to listen. Kara whispered, "Do you think the humans would be proud of us?" Ron smiled faintly. "No," he said. "I think they'd expect us to go further." By the next dawn, the way of the silent hunt spread through every tribe across the valley. Predators who once fought endlessly now planned together. Hunts became cleaner, faster, and wiser. For the first time, they hunted not out of hunger, but out of purpose. And somewhere beyond the stars, where human voices once roared in war, a quiet echo remained. A whisper that the cubs had turned into a legacy. Victory belongs not to the strongest, but to those who learn. The night sky above Kralthun shimmered with strange light, brighter, whiter, unlike any star the predators had ever seen. For years, the cubs who once defied their elders had grown into leaders. Under Ron's guidance, the tribes had united. The forests were quieter now, the hunts more precise, the battles fewer. But tonight, something ancient returned to the skies. A streak of silver fire cut across the horizon. A ship. A human ship. The hunters of Kralthun froze as it descended through the clouds, engines roaring like thunder gods. Dust and wind swept the valley as the vessel landed near the ancient crash site, the place where it had all begun. Ron stood at the edge of the clearing, his fur rippling in the storm of sound and light. He felt no fear, only awe. The ship's ramp lowered with a hiss and figures stepped out, humans in gray suits, their helmets glowing with blue light. The leader, Captain Reyes, scanned the area in silence. Her visor flashed as she read the data from her wrist console. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "These readings, these structures, they've evolved." Her crew spread out scanning the ruins, but what caught their attention wasn't the old wreckage. It was the predators themselves. They weren't charging, snarling, or threatening. They were standing in formation, perfect formation, silent, disciplined, watching. Ron stepped forward slowly, his head high, his voice calm. "You came back," Captain Reyes froze. "You speak English?" "Not perfectly," Ron said with a faint smile. "But we listened. We learned." She removed her helmet, her dark hair falling free. "We thought your kind destroyed the research team that crashed here." Ron shook his head. "We didn't destroy them. We learned from them. Their machine taught us your ways, your war games." The humans exchanged stunned looks. One of them whispered, "War games? The simulation pod we lost?" "Yes," Ron said. "It still speaks, though its voice fades." Rhea stepped closer, studying him with cautious respect. "You used human tactics?" Ron nodded. "We did. At first to survive, then to grow. We learned your strategy and your mercy. The captain's eyes softened. Mercy? Yes, he said. You fought with purpose, not madness. You used mind over muscle. We were wild before. You made us something more. Kara approached beside him, bowing her head. Your games showed us that strength without wisdom is death. We no longer hunt just to kill. Reyes looked around. You built a civilization. From lessons humans left behind. Ron's gaze turned upward to the glowing ship. You built your strength in the stars. We built ours in the shadows. Maybe we are not so different. A silence fell. A peaceful, heavy silence filled with understanding. The captain walked to the old wreck where the first hollow cube had been found. She knelt beside it, brushing away dust. The cube flickered weakly, its blue light trembling like an old memory. A voice played, faint and cracked with age. Remember, victory is not strength. It is intelligence. The same line that had changed Ron's world. Reyes smiled, her eyes glistening. That was Commander Holt's training file. I knew him. Ron's golden eyes met hers. Then he taught us both. By morning, the humans and predators sat together around a shared fire. They exchanged stories, of the wars humans survived and the lessons the predators learned. There was no fear, no distrust, only curiosity. Captain Reyes handed Ron a small silver emblem, the mark of Earth's unity force. Take this, she said softly, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. Between our species, Ron accepted it carefully, holding it up to the rising sun. 2 worlds, he said, but one legacy. When the humans left, their engines roared into the dawn. The predators watched the sky until the ship became a single spark among the stars. Kara stood beside Ron, whispering, Do you think they'll come back? Ron smiled faintly. They don't need to. They already live here. He touched his chest. In every choice we make. That night, the stars over Kralthun burned brighter than ever before. As if the universe itself was proud. The predators had once been beasts. The humans had once been conquerors, but together, they had become teachers of each other's souls. And on that alien world where claws met compassion and war met wisdom, a new story began. Not of domination, but of understanding the end.